You've probably seen this image, right? It's one of the most famous, most powerful shots in movie history. A weary knight on a lonely beach playing chess against, well, against death himself. This one scene from Ingmar Bergman's 1957 masterpiece, The Seventh Seal, has been copied and joked about for decades. But what's really going on here? Why a game of chess? And what is the knight actually playing for?
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the game itself. Then, we'll dive into the knight's spiritual crisis, what he calls the silence of God. After that, we'll see how the whole film is really a giant allegory, which leads us to the different characters, or the humanity on the board. And finally, we'll get to the heart of it all, the search for one single, meaningful deed.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our knight, his name is Antonius Block. He's just gotten back to Sweden after fighting in the Crusades for 10 long years. But the home he returns to is a nightmare. It's been completely ravaged by the Black Death. And right there, on this desolate beach, he meets Death, who tells him his time is up. But Block, he's not ready to go. So he does something pretty bold. He challenges Death to a game of chess. Now you might be thinking he's just trying to cheat Death, win his life back. But that's not really it. The chess game, it's a stalling tactic. It's a way for him to buy some more time. But time for what? His real motive is way deeper than just wanting to live a little longer.
See, he looks back on his life, that whole decade spent fighting in a crusade he now sees as pointless, and he feels like it was all for nothing. He tells Death straight up, I need this delay to do one meaningful deed. So the game of chess, this epic battle of strategy and intellect, becomes the perfect symbol for his desperate, rational search for some kind of purpose in a world that just feels random and cruel.
And this whole thing was incredibly personal for the director. Ingmar Bergman admitted that he was grappling with his own mortality. He said he basically made this film to stare his own fear of death right in the face, kind of like therapy on a grand scale. So in a lot of ways, the knight's quest was Bergman's quest too.
So what's really at the heart of the knight's torment? It's a massive crisis of faith. I mean, think about it. He spent 10 years of his life fighting for God, and he comes home to find this: unspeakable suffering, plague, and a feeling that God is completely absent. His whole journey in the film is just this desperate search for some kind of sign, any sign, in the face of what he calls God's silence.
And you can see he's trapped between these two extremes. On one side, you've got the flagellants. They represent this absolute, terrifying, blind faith. They march through towns, whipping themselves, hoping all that suffering will somehow please a God they can't even be sure is listening. And on the other side, you've got his squire, Jones. He's a total realist, a cynic who thinks religion is a sham and the only meaning you can find is in the here and now, through practical, decent actions. And this right here, this is the knight's core question. It's this cry of desperation that he lets out in a church confessional, hoping for some guidance. But, and this is the devastating twist, he's not talking to a priest. That shadowy figure on the other side of the screen, it's Death himself, who's just learned everything he needs to know about the knight's strategy, both in life and in their chess game.
Okay, now to really get this film, you have to kind of look past the historical setting. In fact, if you're a history nerd, you might be watching this and notice a whole bunch of things that don't quite add up. The film is actually full of what look like historical mistakes.
For instance, the Crusades he's coming home from ended way before the Black Death even started. Those flagellant movements? Not really a big thing in Scandinavia. And that church painter they meet, Albertus Pictor? He was a real guy, but he lived 100 years later. So, are these just sloppy errors, or are they completely intentional?
Well, it's because Bergman isn't trying to make a historical documentary. He's creating an allegory. He's just using the Middle Ages as a backdrop to talk about anxieties that are totally timeless. The characters, the events, they aren't meant to be literal. They're symbols for much bigger ideas.
And this is the key that unlocks the whole film. Bergman himself said he was really writing about the fear of the atomic bomb during the Cold War. The medieval plague was just a powerful historical metaphor for that very modern dread that hung over everyone in the 1950s. Suddenly you realize this movie isn't about the 14th century at all. It's about any time humanity is staring down an existential threat.
So, if the world is an allegory, then all the characters are like the pieces on that big chessboard. Each one represents a totally different way of dealing with life, death, and that big, silent question about God. You've got the knight, the intellectual who's trying to think his way to an answer. There's his squire, Jones, the ultimate pragmatist, who just deals with what's in front of him. You have the flagellant, who represent that extreme, punishing faith, and then you have Jove and Mia, a couple of traveling actors.
Because in the middle of all this darkness and suffering and heavy philosophy, Jove and Mia represent something completely different: hope. They're just this young family, living a simple life, finding pure joy in each other and their baby son. They're not wrestling with God's silence. They're just living.
There's this one beautiful, quiet moment in the film where the knight sits down with Jorf and Mia and shares a simple meal of wild strawberries and milk. And for just a minute, all his torment, all his questioning, it just melts away. He experiences this moment of pure, simple joy. And even the cynical squire, Johns, sees it. It's this little flash of grace that gives us a hint about the answer Bloch has been searching for.
So, how does it all end? Does the knight finally get the knowledge he's been demanding from the heavens? Well, no. He doesn't find his answer. Instead, he creates it.
Okay, picture this. It's the final match. Death is about to call checkmate. Just then, the actor Jove, who has these visions, sees death coming for his family. In that split second, the knight knows what he has to do. He makes this clumsy-looking move and accidentally sweeps all the chess pieces off the board. Death is annoyed, distracted for just a moment while he puts them all back, and in that tiny window of time, Jove, Mia, and their babies slip away. The knight has finally done his one meaningful deed, and then he calmly turns back to the board and accepts his fate.
And that's it. That's his great revelation. All his agonized searching, all his prayers, all his demands for answers from a silent universe, they were pointed in the wrong direction. The meaning he was looking for wasn't something out there to be discovered. It was something inside of him, waiting for him to act.
I mean, this is basically existentialist philosophy 101. It's just like the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre argued, we're just thrown into the world without some pre-written purpose. It's up to us, through our choices and our actions, to create our own meaning.
The knight's one meaningful deed wasn't some grand, holy act for God. It was a small, selfless, human act of compassion. He sacrificed his last few moments to save a family, to make sure that the simple joy and hope that they represented would get to live on. So in the end, The Seventh Seal isn't really a movie about whether God exists or not. It's about how we're supposed to live in a world where we might never get the answers we want. The film's final shot shows Jove and Mia, safe, watching from a distance, as death leads the knight and his friends away in a haunting dance of death. Life goes on, and that turns Bergman's big question back on all of us. In the time we've got, what will our one meaningful deed be?